What's going on, guys? It's Frito here for your Overwatch. We've been eagerly awaiting the release of Mauga since 2019. The devs intentionally took longer to develop the character, and I think with the kit that we've got, you can tell why this kind of tank needed 5v5 to really make sense. Mauga is quite complicated, with multiple modifiers or different situations to use the same ability. There's a lot of execution, decision-making, and matchup knowledge that you'll need to have to really maximize Mauga, or even at the skill floor, not get rolled by the things that insta-kill tanks, which will still be an issue, and we'll talk more about the general meta implications of the character later on in the video. First, let's talk about the design of the kit. His abilities are really fun to use, fit the character design well in his personality, and gives you a lot to think about as a tank. It's very important to note that there's a huge spread difference between when you're shooting one of the miniguns as opposed to shooting two. This is required to know to even get the base understanding of the character. If you're at any kind of range outside of really close or shooting a tank or a really big target, you're going to probably be wanting to shoot one of them at a time until you full commit in, which you will want to do. That's when you're most effective, but you have to read when your opportunities allow you to do that, otherwise you'll get blown up. So his basic gameplay loop will be setting enemies at fire from range with his primary fire, which can crit if you hit the head, either will, but the secondary fire will automatically crit even if it's a body shot up against burning targets, which also counts for Ash's TNT. When Mauga hits crits, he gets extra shield health. Now, it's not going to stack up to be as impressive as, like, Wrecking Ball's personal shield, and I don't even think I rate it as highly as the shields that you get from Doomfist landing his abilities. But it's a constant state of increased health, which you'll definitely need, and is going to help you understand which matchups you can take when. Because what gets even more severe is when you get in, like, shotgun range, and you shoot both of them at once, which will continuously keep them on fire and giving you auto crits, and probably melting the thing to begin with because the DPS is so high. But even if that target is getting healed, so let's say it's a Bastion or a tank is usually one of the better things for you to square up on, you hit your cardiac overdrive and that gives you lifesteal. So when you get locked into those long-term attritional brawls, the right ones, at close range especially, that's when you really can sustain. Because not only are you a massive threat, being that aggressive threat sustains your life in two different ways. Now, Cardiac Overdrive also reduces incoming damage, so it's like a small fortify effect, and it applies to your team as well, giving you more decisions to make. Like, each ability has multiple decisions to make. I think just learning the character, just keeping yourself alive is the first thing you should learn, but I think the higher tier application will be starting to give lifesteal to other teammates, particularly DPS, I think, are going to look scary with the right usage of Cardiac Overdrive, or the other characters that will like to play with Mauga that we'll talk about later. Now, also a complicated ability is Overrun, which is like a Rhine pin, which you can also cancel if you want to get from A to B, and you're unstoppable while using it. You can get Sombra hacked, but all other forms of CC don't affect you while using it. Now, you can still get shot, obviously, so you don't necessarily want to run it down into damage, but running away from crowd control effects or ultimates, or running to your next piece of cover, like a staging position, similar to the way a Winston or Wrecking Ball might stage from A to B, is a big difference maker. In some ways, you might look at Mauga and think he's going to play like Junker Queen, but in truth, the matchups he can take and the way he moves around the map is quite different. Queen pops Shout and can run things down, and is actually surprisingly good at medium range. Mauga's not so good at medium range. He's good at extreme close range. And when you're going to look scariest is when you properly perform the Overrun slam. Overrun can feel a little tricky because just like a Winston Primal Rage, it can be easy to accidentally boop targets when you don't want to. At the end of Overrun, Mauga performs a leap, and that's going to knock back enemies, which sometimes you might want to do that. You can maybe get them off the map, but most of the time you actually want to land on them. So not hit them with the knockback effect, but instead land on them to apply the mini Earth Shatter mini stun. That alone will deal burst damage to them, and then will make them a lot easier to clean them up with your miniguns. That's the ticket with Mauga. If Roadhog can get a pick by hooking a target from far, Mauga gets a pick from slamming on the target and letting them them up at close range. And a lot of targets, even tanky ones, won't be able to outlast Mauga. If you are able to get onto a Bastion in this way, as long as you prop your abilities appropriately, you can lifesteal through a fight with him. And then the final layer on top of all of this is Cage Fight, which adds something truly new to Overwatch and forces both him and his enemies locked inside of it to maintain in that close range brawl, adding a huge barrier as well. So normally you're used to not playing against a shield when you're up against a Mauga, but he gets like an even better Winston bubble all of a sudden, which is going to zone out backliners and force those brawly characters to get locked into a sustained battle against him, which most of the time he can win with his insane DPS and lifesteal. So that as well has a big skill ceiling, because I'm sure there's going to be times where just even deploying the shield might be good enough. But for sure, it's going to be the type of ultimate that clears off an objective, because its radius is so big that those long drawn-out checkpoint fights are going to resolve because the enemy's got to jump in on it, struggle to get damage on it from afar. It lasts a long time, so the power of this ult, I think, will compensate for any weaknesses that we might talk about. He'll kind of feel like Ramatra in a lot of ways, where his ultimate is a very big guaranteed checkpoint fight, and there's ways for you to use your mechanics to convert neutral fight kills. If the enemy doesn't give you an easy matchup you can win, a lot of the times you're going to be saving up for that big play with the ultimate. But that's like tank gameplay in general. Most tanks function like that. Okay, now we want to talk about some general observations of what this does for the game, what this changes for the tank role. The biggest difference maker for me is that this is a brawler style tank with insane mobility. Previously, Reinhardt was the only one that could really clear a distance, but because his playstyle wants to shield his team, you usually wouldn't want to do that. Sometimes, yes, but Mauga can do it all the time. And since he's unstoppable while charging, you won't just get interrupted and blown up trying to pin reposition from A to B. A lot of times in the Overwatch community, we almost like sort of debate what the terms brawl versus rush actually means. Both of them imply close range characters. Mauga to me is definitely a rush character, which means he has to close the distance, as opposed to Reinhardt, who maybe can hide on the objective and lure the enemy to come brawl him, getting value from defending with the shield. Like, that's an option. Often you will want to go aggro even with Rein, but he's got more of a balanced playstyle in that way. Whereas Mauga, while he can shoot at range, it's not that great. Like, it does nothing to write home about. It's about as effective as Ramatra shooting at range, which is situational at best. That's not what you want to be aiming to do. You want to be aiming to try to find those lanes to get in close and lock something in a close range fight with you, hopefully by stunning them. Now, if that's his major advantage, his major weakness is that he doesn't really have defense. The defense he does have is insane, and it's by getting on matchups that he can win, which is a lot of things. Most other tanks, if he gets to shoot them, he's going to outlast them and outbrawl them. But because his sustain comes from dealing damage, damage mitigation is incredibly bad for him. And he doesn't really have any. Like, Cardiac Overdrive applies a mini fortify, but I almost don't even notice that part of it. I don't know what the value is at this point, and of course these things are always subject to change. The huge benefit to Mauga will be that he is a playmaker, but does the tank role need that oftentimes? Like, Orisa is less of a playmaker, but with her own Fortify and Spinny Spear, and then an extra Fortify when she ults, she doesn't actually need to deal damage ever, and can still get a lot of holding the frontline value. Mauga, on the other hand, if you put a shield in his way, very quickly you notice how squishy he becomes. Even a character like Brig, I found, was really slowing down the enemy Mauga when I could run over their supports, and my support could dodge away and shield up his incoming damage, which robs him of life. And I think defenses on tanks are already good against other things in the game, that it is like doubly good if that's the way your tank sustains. So then it puts even more emphasis on needing to go aggressive. And we might say, well, we kind of know how that works because Junker Queen, you could argue, is similar, but her axe swings are a big cleave that goes through a lot of defenses. And she has a ranged attack, and it's kind of better in a hit and run playstyle, whereas Mauga really wants to get in and stay in. He has high DPS, but not good medium range burst damage like Queen does. So that changes where he's going to be effective in terms of positioning and movement through the map. This will change as the community masters this hero, and there's so much to master, the ceiling is quite high, but I think you'll easily be tricked into thinking that he can brawl always on the front line, and then all of a sudden the counters come out, and if you do not have the right hero picks on your side, it can start to look kind of scary. All right, let's talk about some wider meta talk. Applicability of Mauga. There's a few things I think you should look out for as being not as good as they described. The main one being he's not very good against flyers. They talked about how that he can shoot flying characters from range, but as I've said, that's not really a strong thing he does. He'll add some damage, yeah, and is a bit better at it than Ramatra, but it's really more of a focus fire thing. Like, you can help your Soldier 76 chip away some damage in the air, but don't expect to confirm kills that way. Similarly, he does nothing against snipers or on sniper maps. Way too long of a distance for him to clear. He doesn't have a shield. Getting headshot is not fun for Mauga. He's not got any defense against that. His hitbox is gargantuan, the biggest in the game ever. Sojourn, Hanzo, and even Widowmaker will farm up burst damage on him if he tries to sustain a frontline position for any amount of time, making it even more required that you get in on your life leech duels. And I also think he doesn't really contest flanker heroes very well in general. If they've got the mobility to escape his best play, which is to slam you and then light you up for a second, he just has to ignore them. And that's a lot of archetypes of characters, right? And to be fair to him, there's other tanks that don't interact with any of those things either, but they can be so defensible in themselves that they just hold the cart or hold their position. And then the things that I think hard counter him are not dissimilar to what counters Ramatra, who's also a really large hitbox, can close the distance, but because he's so big, he can get blasted before he does so and has to be very opportunistic when he does go in. I'm going to say Ana and Zen destroy this character, considering all of his sustain comes from Cardiac Overdrive to Lifesteal, or adding Discord to him is going to amplify the damage of every teammate on the biggest hitbox ever added to Overwatch. So there's kind of like no such thing as missing Mauga. And while in theory you can go actually fight in Lifesteal and win against the Bastion, if the enemy's got too many answers for you with Mauga and too many targets that are kind of like a must close the distance on and get a pick on them, well, good luck. Because you got to outplay the Ana abilities and find a target to jump on to lifesteal, and there's a Bastion and a Zen, and all of that's farming you from medium range. I think most players play Overwatch with a tank-focused mindset. It's very easy to put things into tanks anyway, and while luckily for him, he does bully a lot of tanks. Like, there's a lot of tanks that will get destroyed by the damage of Mauga. Pretty simply, he's got lots of ammo, huge DPS against large targets, and heals himself from doing that. So he wins a lot of tank matchups, which actually is probably his biggest strength, I'd say. The one that is going to be leveraged most easily. When you have a character whose stats can just like beat a tank, that's outrageous. And because the counter picks for Mauga are a bit obvious to me, I think a natural pairing will be required in Kiriko. We've seen Kiriko be effective with Junker Queen or Roadhog, and Mauga's another tank where Suzu feels required for him to actually execute his playstyle without being hard countered. Keep in mind, Suzu will cleanse the burn effect in a Mauga mirror, but most importantly, you'll need to cleanse the Ana nade. Then on top of that, another kind of issue I have is that Mauga's mobility incentivizes players to go off on their own because he's so freaking fast. Previously, the only character that had that kind of speed was Wrecking Ball, and it's a good comparison because a lot of Wrecking Ball players struggle to sync up with their team. Mauga very easily can be attempting the correct playstyle that I think he'll need to use, but without the right team comp that can go in with him, he's not going to get the support he needs to make the space and plays that he'll need to make. Like, he can't just sit and ride the cart and shoot from range. He gets destroyed by headshots and abilities like that. He's got to go take some map. So particularly Kiri, I think, goes in with him, and he actually doesn't need much healing once he's in and cleansed, so that means the Kiri is going to be able to be a good rush partner with him, gaining the effects of Cardiac Overdrive, so she'll be tankier and get lifesteal. And here's like the extra super nerd hyper meta theory crafting for you. Lifesteal is most insane on characters with high burst damage. I mean, it's kind of insane on anything, but imagine getting a Kiriko low, she gets Cardiac Overdrive applied to her, and she headshots you. Whether she gets the kill or not, she gets a burst of health back. on a character that's already durable, right? Due to all of her escapes. Tiny hitbox, wall climb, telly, Suzu. So she plays in with this kind of playstyle really well. And the major difference, I think, from Queen is Junker Queen really needs to use her shout for distance control. It's nice when you get to use it in the fight for the extra health, then it's super powered. But she doesn't have a gap closer beside that as well. Mauga, on the other hand, will be using Overrun to close the distance, and then his aura when the fight is committed. Always. Because it doesn't do anything otherwise. I mean, damage reduction, but that's not how you're going to use it. So I'm skeptical whether Mauga will be a top tier tank or not, but since top tier players can play Lucio Kiriko, and a lot of that survivability, self-heal, and being able to add damage, that all synergizes with Mauga's playstyle. We've seen that be very good in different iterations of the game, because otherwise, I think the type of support you'd want to look to with Mauga, maybe at more like most tiers of play, is ones that just hold their position by themselves and don't really need much help. So Brig can do that, but also Bap and Alari for their ability to deal damage, to take aim duels. So either they rush in with the Mauga or they just hold their own. The supports you badly don't want to see on your team is slow backline poke style supports that want to be helping your DPS. I'm going to say Zen and Mercy aren't going to help Mauga at all, basically. Better would be to play Ana, who at least he can utilize a lot of her abilities like any brawler type character can. Nade and Nano will amplify what he already wants to be doing. And without that, he sort of like doesn't function a little bit. Another one I'm not a huge fan of is Lifeweaver, because Weaver likes to defend and has limited range on his abilities, actually. Mauga needs to close the distance, isn't going to be too good anchoring and waiting, and gets more value by staying in rather than being pulled out. In the short term, I bet the higher tier is not going to find him too threatening, but I think it's the kind of move set and stats that with mastery could outweigh expectations. But at the start, I think the ease of the counters will make him a bit punishing to play at higher tiers. But if you really master him, you can probably pub stomp through the ranks, which is already the case with high skill ceiling tank heroes, despite what the meta is. This is one of my favorite things about 5v5 in general, is that the skill expression on the individual heroes is amplified. There's less team complexity, but a hero like Mauga does have the razzle-dazzle to outplay his counters. If you use your moving and pathing to dodge on a nade or just get cleansed and land those slams and get your picks, well, all the meta crafting theory falls apart real quick when you start getting pickoffs. I think similar to Doomfist, Mauga's move set and skill set has the ceiling that players are going to begin to really maximize Overrun and feel kind of suffocating in a similar way, because the charge has unstoppable. So it's like if you don't hack him and you're a backliner and he runs at you, he's hitting the slam. Like, he can do that every time. And despite all of his other weaknesses, landing that might be all you need in order to get the character to work and snowball after that first pick. What do you guys think of Mauga? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.